Welcome to the India Deep Tech podcast series. I'm your guest host, Anil Achyuta, Managing Director of TDK Ventures. Today, we're with Arun Vinayak, Founder CEO of Exponent Energy, which is a Bangalore-based startup focusing on electrifying commercial fleets in India. Arun, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Awesome to be here.
Thank you for coming in. And let's dive right in. Give me an elevator pitch about Exponent in a nutshell.
Oh, well, we charge vehicles in 15 minutes. I think we're the world's fastest charging tech. Also the most affordable rapid charging technology out there. A lot of people ask us, are we a battery company or a charging company? The answer is we're a full stack energy company. We build battery technology and a charging network that helps you charge up in 15 minutes and keep going.
Tell me more.
I think if you look at the last 10, 15 years, EVs have gone from being toys for the rich to now being mainstream acceptable, at least on the vehicle side. Everything about the vehicle side is better. They're faster, they look better, they got more torque, no maintenance, no vibrations. Everyone loves vehicles. The drive side, EVs on the drive side. The problem holding back mass adoption is energy, right? Everything from where do I charge, how long will it take, will my battery last, with the cost of all of this. So if you really break it down, the vehicle side problems have already been solved. Right? They're already better than their petroleum counterparts. What's holding back adoption is the energy ecosystem. Energy for EVs is too slow, it's too complicated, it's too expensive. So that's what we want to simplify. What if energy for EVs could be as simple, as seamless, and far more affordable than ever before? Right? Then all of us will go electric today. So we think solving for energy and solving for the energy ecosystem has a linchpin effect in how many people we can get to go electric. So I think so that's the focus for Exponent. We believe a lot of people will build products, but I believe that someone needs to solve for the underlying energy ecosystem, and that's what we're doing at Exponent. Sorry.
Awesome. Maybe you can tell us what motivated you to start the company, and what was the sort of the aha moment.
Oh, okay. Well, I've been in the EV space for like 10 years now. 2013, 2014 was one of the founding partners at Ather Energy, was a chief product officer there. So we've been building EVs grounds up for a while. So I think just been looking at India's constraints around this. And I think what's painfully obvious is India's unique in everything from road conditions to grid conditions to temperature conditions to even price points. Right, so it's a fairly over-constrained problem statement to solve for. So I think from very early on realized India needs a platform for India. Also because we look at usage behaviors, right, and usage patterns. Fun fact, a lot of people in India don't park at home, right? So how will you charge at home? So how will India go electric, right? Second, most segments in India can't afford large batteries, right? So again, what works for the US, Europe, a little more advanced economies is I'll give you a large battery, a 400, 500 kilometer range passenger EV, you park at home, you charge at home. You need public charging maybe on road trips, so even 1 hour is good enough, right? Cut shift to India, you realize most people will use public charging every day because that's almost the only way to charge, which means even 1 hour is too long, it needs to be sub 10 minutes. And most segments can't afford more than 100, 200 kilometers worth of range. Like most segments need 80 to 100 kilometers worth of range, that's it, right? So India needs really small batteries and ultra fast public charging, right? And so that was in some sense, a big realization in the larger direction need that India needs, right? India needs something called power density. A lot of the world is focusing on energy density, right? Solid state, the 1,000 kilometer range car, for example, that everyone's chasing. So I think that was one aha moment where we realized directionally, and it's not for the top 1% in India, it's for all of India. We realized directionally the technology needs to be different. This technology we need to build in India for India. And something else that we were also playing around with was charging station profitability. We realized a lot of people are setting up charging stations and they were charging 2 vehicles a day, 3 vehicles a day at max. So they were dead assets. They were bad businesses because for that piece of land, they were doing very little energy throughput, right? And so we realized, interestingly, that problem also gets solved through rapid charging. So if you really look at it, if you can crack rapid charging, and at this point in time, we didn't know how we would do it, but we just knew that if you could crack rapid charging, users would love it because it's just that seamless diesel or CNG-like experience. OEMs could sell vehicles with smaller batteries, make the vehicle lighter, more affordable, means more demand. And the charge point operators could actually build a profitable business. So it's sort of this unique win-win-win ecosystem model. And that's why we call it Exponent, because we thought this is not a linear some game, right?
That's a cool name. I did not realize that.
Yeah. And everything in life in exponential, right? Like we go from, as a VC, you believe in the power law, but but we also realize if you go from like 4-hour charging to 50-minute charging, like everything is exponentially harder. So we realized. So that was also the engineering geek reason behind it. Yeah.
Is 15 minutes fast enough? Don't you think it should be 3 minutes or maybe less than that?
Yeah, it should. And I think the answer depends on the segment.
Yeah.
I think, for example, in India, if you own a CNG vehicle, you already spend more than 45 minutes, 1 hour to fill it up. So we're already beating the petroleum counterparts in 15 minutes. But the answer is, it's never enough, right? And I think that's the beauty of mobility in general over the last 100 years. We've never been satisfied. We've always wanted faster. We always wanted to go further. We've always wanted more accessibility. So I think that's beautiful that we keep chasing this. So 15 minutes is where we are today. I think there's a future in which we already have a solution that does 5-minute charging in the lab today, but it's not commercially viable, right? So we don't talk about it. But I think there's a future in which we have 5-minute charging, we have 2-minute charging. Maybe if you talk about drones, maybe they would have smaller batteries and quick 2-minute flash charging. Maybe two-wheelers would have a 5-minute charging solution from us at some point of time. But today, when we look at the commercial vehicle segment, I think 15 minutes charging is already like a 20x advantage over the industry average. So it's good enough for disruptive adoption. But of course, I think we internally, from the engineer in us always wants to do more. Yeah.
Tell me more about how you found that product market fit, because it seems like many of the deep tech companies struggle with this. They have a great technology, and they need to find customers or paying customers, and suddenly they realize that, oh my God, this is a hard problem. So it seems like you guys have cracked it. Walk us through the journey.
Yeah, I think personally, I'm not a deep tech person myself, right? I think I understand the language. I'm a product person, so I think a lot of us in the company are subscribe very strongly to design thinking. For us, design is not just about moving pixels around. Like, I think fundamentally a lot of ops, infrastructure, cost problems get solved through just design thinking, right? So I think, like when I said, when we started Exponent, we didn't exactly know the technology answer to how we would charge rapid charging. We just knew top down, if you can design an ecosystem like this, the benefits are huge, and obviously there is a product market fit. Of course, we did our interviews, we spoke to customers. At some point in time, we actually sat with 100 diesel drivers and actually did deliveries with them. This was during peak COVID, so we were all like sitting next to the Tata AS, driving the seat, did deliveries with them. So we just really got down to understanding, and without spending a single penny on the tech, right? So this is just spent 6 months solid understanding consumer behavior. We realized a lot of these guys owning these Tata Aces don't park at home, right? They just park on the road. So like a lot of these insights that we're talking about today came when we went beyond the bubble of our own EVs that we understand and started looking at the consumer that we really want to go after. And why commercial vehicles? Because I think it was very clear in India, that's the energy focus, right? If you look at in India, commercial vehicles, they're 10% of the vehicles, but they consume 70% of our energy. This is unlike US, for example. In the US, it's passenger EV, passenger four-wheelers, right, that do most of the energy consumption. In India, it's actually commercial vehicles. And this is the market that needed flexibility uptime the most. A lot of us will go home, office, back, right? So maybe flexibility is not the key need for a passenger four-wheeler. Or even a two-wheeler, I'm going to go home, office, back. Maybe I'll just remove the battery, take it home. So there's some of these segments that sounded like obvious EV segments, but were not obvious from an energy company point of view. Sure, that two-wheelers might be the largest volume with respect to vehicles sold, but as an energy company, it made no sense to go serve two-wheelers because two-wheelers were spending $600 a month on fuel, right? So from a TAM perspective, that is very limiting. But when I look at a three-wheeler, for example, they spend 12,000 rupees a month on fuel, and they're desperate to go electric. And they have 100 kg batteries, and they're doing 200 plus kilometers a day. So the need for flexibility, the need for uptime, and they don't have fixed routes, right? Like unlike someone going home, office, back, someone earning on a three-wheeler is going all over the place. Sometimes he's in North Bangalore in the airport, sometimes he's all the way down to Hosur. We've had customers do 300 kilometers plus a day. We have customers doing 200 plus kilometers multiple times in a month, right? So just the need for flexibility and uptime is maximum in this segment. And I think that's when our technology perfectly fits in. So I think generally the way I look at it is when you want to launch a new technology, you should launch it in a place where you have very little competition, right? Where almost you're the only solution for the customer, right? So sure, today we have a lot of customers who buy us and still maybe do 100 kilometers a day. Sure, it's revenue clocked, but we don't count that as 100% success because we're still tracking customers who are doing 150, 200 kilometers a day because those are the repeat customers. Those are guys who will come back and will definitely buy an Exponent-powered product in the future.
So what do you tell all the people who are developing silicon anode, lithium metal, and all these next-gen cells? Are they just your customers, or are they your like suppliers for the future, or is that how you look at them?
Yeah, so we look at them as potential suppliers or partners.
Okay.
We are cell agnostic at Exponent. We are not a material science company. Just to set context today, the entire battery industry looks at, say, battery management as a pure protection device, right? And a lot of the performance is defined by the material science itself. We just think that's very limiting. We're not against material science. We think that's awesome. But we think even with existing material science, you can just do a lot more if you just understand what's happening real time within a cell. Right? And everything in life has gotten smarter. I mean, we all have electronics, we all have sensors, we all have software telling us how to get better. So even with energy, it's about time that we just get smarter about how we manage cells. So today, if you take a regular cell, you're fundamentally depending on the anode material and the manufacturing tolerance of every cell to define its own performance. So you do CCCV, where you're putting constant amount of current, then you're holding constant amount of voltage, and you're literally letting the cell anode determine when to cut off charging, which is very limiting, right? We take a more proactive approach. We understand what's happening real time with every anode. So we constantly course correcting charging current. We understand how, in our point of view, we realize cells are cans with chemicals, right? It needs active management to really make it work better. Now, if a company gives us better anode, we could do a lot more. That the question you asked is, what about 2-minute charging? That needs a combination of our technology and better material science sort of really working together, and the results would be exponential. So
that's a golden nugget, by the way. Yeah. So I think people thinking about BMS as a purely protective layer and also in a reductionist way. I've heard people say something like, oh, you just get voltage, current, and temperature. That's the only 3 variables you get. Yeah. You don't get to play with more. Yeah. Right? And suddenly you're telling me that, no, we can do a lot more with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's such an important piece.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at your pulse meters, all you get is a pulse.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But you have so much inferences from that, right? So same way, voltage, current, temperatures, just by itself is valuable, but if you just understand a time series understanding of that, if you have a virtual model, for example, that you're always comparing it to, there's just insights are just mind-blowing.
Do you have like a physics model that tells you what's happening in a cell and you're kind of building inferences, or what's the
Absolutely.
secret?
So today what we have is a physics model, right, which is based on a lot of cycling in the lab and also cycling in the field, where we're constantly testing different parameters, and we're constantly trying to test out, in some sense, the prediction model, which is telling us, hey, is the anode stressed out or not? So we're sort of always looking for lithium crowding, right, which is the polarization of the cell, right? And that's the fundamental risk factor when you're rapid charging, right? And it doesn't happen all the time. It has to happen sometimes. But though sometimes it's critical, you've got to give the cell a break. So we're constantly building out models that give us a voltage, current, temperature, sort of a 3D map that allows us to predict that at this SOC, at this temperature, at this sort of current versus voltage response, this was good or this was bad. Like voltage going up is good, but it can also be bad, right? And you sort of need to tell the difference, right? Today it's a physics model, but obviously as we're getting more data, we are sort of changing the model itself to be a more data-driven model, right? And that's the next step to our technology.
That is super, super interesting. So how does Exponent add value to the entire ecosystem? Maybe give us an overview of what the ecosystem looks like.
Sure, just to map out all our stakeholders, starting from the person who's buying this vehicle, then there's the vehicle manufacturer building this vehicle, there's charge point operators who set up charging, and of course financiers who finance these products. So for us, it's about getting all stakeholders together and ensure everyone's winning. And I think that's what technology and our energy stack sort of helps bring together. So obviously for end users, the benefit is 15-minute charging, which means flexibility, freedom, and the vehicle's also lower in cost. So what we do is we stitch up financiers and the end user together. Because the vehicle, they're able to earn more, we are able to put in a smaller battery with 50-minute charging. You don't need a large battery anymore with rapid charging. The vehicle price falls down, and because we also give a 3,000 cycle warranty. Right? Most of the battery manufacturers today provide you a 1,000 cycle life warranty with slow charging. With us, we give you a 15-minute charging with a 3,000 cycle warranty. So financing this product becomes much easier for financiers because the fundamental asset life is much, much longer. The earnability risk on this vehicle is much, much lower. So they're far more confident in financing this product. So then users get a benefit of lower cost of vehicle and higher revenue, right? For OEMs, they're able to sell vehicles with a smaller battery, bring down the price point, increase demand. And I think the data on demand is very clear. And because a lot of segments need flexibility and freedom, electrifying that also needs the right energy partner. So OEMs also sort of work with us to unlock beyond the first 10-15% electrification for fleets, which is, you talk about the Amazons and Flipkart, which are fairly obvious to electrify. 85% of logistics in a city like Bangalore, for example, is small SME, right? Small manufacturing enterprises. And so these are guys who own 1 or 2 vehicles. So they need the entire, and they're going all over the place, like I said. So they need the right energy ecosystem to give them that flexibility and freedom to actually go electric. And so this is something we've been able to flip over, make that segment electric, which means a lot more demand for OEMs. And of course, for charge point operators, it's just a great business, right? Today, I set up a piece of land. I charge 2-3 vehicles a day. With Exponent e-pump, our e-pumps are now charging 20 to 40 vehicles a day, every day, right? So fundamentally, that's 10 to 20x more energy throughput on the same piece of land, and that's just a fundamentally better business for them. And what this also means is a secondary benefit or lower cost of energy, right? Because it's like a factory. If my throughput goes up, cost comes down. So because on the same piece of land, I'm now charging 20-30 vehicles a day. Apart from building a profitable business, you can actually reduce the cost of the energy to the end user. So today, if I go slow charge my vehicle, I'm going to spend 3 to 4 hours, but I'm also going to spend 20 to 24 rupees a unit of energy that I'm paying for. With rapid charging, we can actually bring that down all the way to 14 rupees to 16 rupees per unit, while also saving you tons of time, right? So it's sort of a double advantage with rapid charging there.
Very cool. Maybe going back to the user and the usage specific challenges. It seems like everyone will use it in a different way, especially the SME people.
Yeah.
Right. One person maybe they like to charge after 50%.
Yeah.
Someone else might charge after 20%.
Yeah.
Someone might be charging in some very hot temperature. Something like this, right?
Yeah.
So how do you account for all of this? Is this your sort of your moat?
Yeah. So that is our moat, right? And absolutely right. So it's. Like there are days where these vehicles do 70, 80 kilometers a day. There are days where these vehicles have to do 200 kilometers a day. That is the opportunity and that is the problem to solve for, which means, I mean, when you buy a diesel vehicle, you're not asked to not drive because it's hot or because it's cold or because you run out of your 100 kilometer limit for the day, right? So we think if you really need to electrify these segments, people don't care about going green, right? People care about their business, their operations, their cost, their revenue. So if you want people to go electric and you really want to change the sustainability index, I think we've got to build products that work in all conditions and actually deliver more freedom and more flexibility at a lower cost. So for us, that was very clear. And from that point of view, it's about managing all aspects of the technology to deliver this. This can't be a manual operation, right? So, which means the BMS, how it manages voltage, current, temperature profiles, the cooling systems, that's another problem by itself. For example, again, US, Europe, you have Teslas, for example, that has an onboard HVAC system, which costs a few $1,000s. Here, the vehicle itself costs only $3,000, right? So, ironically, in a country like India, where it probably needs cooling the most, can afford it the least. So, we actually re-innovated our thermal systems, where we moved our whole HVAC to the charger. Right? So every time you actually plug in our charger, If your battery is hot, we actually cool it down, and if it's cold, we actually heat it up. So we have that preheating feature. So what we're able to do here is get rid of the cost and weight of the HVAC system from the vehicle, while still making it charge in 15 minutes at any temperature condition. So even if you're at 0 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Celsius, we'll charge you up in 15 minutes.
That is super cool. Maybe I'll go back and tie into one more thing that you said before. You guys have a design thinking approach.
Yeah.
Do you hire people who have this sort of inclination to think very much at the product centric level? Do you select people like that from when you're recruiting?
Oh, absolutely. I think I have the strong belief that engineers should not create problems; they should solve problems. And I think we have a very strong, small but very strong product thinking team that's always thinking what's the future of energy look like, right? When you go from Bangalore has 400 petrol stations, right? Roughly.
That's it?
That's it, right?
I did not know that.
Yeah. So energy is very centralized in the petroleum world. Right? We all go to get petroleum, but in EV, energy will come to us. So when you go, let's say 10 years from now, all of Bangalore is electric. We're not going to have 400 charging stations, not 4,000. We're going to have 40,000, probably more charging stations. So what does that look like? What does a city with 40,000 charging stations look like? And each station will have to be automated. Right? Very few things in India are automated, right? So how do you have a truly manless energy operation on the side of the road? Right? How does this plug in into the entire city aesthetic? How do vehicles just pop off the road, charge up, and keep going? How does payments happen? How do you ensure that other vehicles don't come and hog up your charging station by just parking in front of it? For example, this is one of our biggest problems today. So a lot of this is the first jab is taken by design thinking folk, designers, product folk, who in some sense don't have an appreciation for the limitations of technology. And I think that's awesome. I think you're just demanding some ridiculously crazy stuff that engineers then maybe deliver half of it, right? And that's okay. So you're sort of shooting for the stars and maybe you land on the moon sort of approach. And I think it's very critical that designers create problems and engineers solve problems and not the other way around for channels.
That's ridiculous. Maybe that brings me to your 5-year and 10-year vision. Paint us a picture where Exponent will be, or where Bangalore will be, or where India will be.
Well, I think India will be all electric by then for sure. Obviously, our vision there is that Exponent plays a large role in that. We want to be the largest energy company for mobility in India. Energy for mobility is pretty much the largest portion of our spends for energy. And we think energy is now a tech problem. We think it's a two-sided problem. So I think what Shell is today, or what BP is today, which is a company that's into trading commodities, which is you extract it, refine it, distribute it, trade it. That's what the energy game is today. The future energy game is actually about transactions, right? Because the upstream is already solved. There's already energy in the wall, right? There's energy everywhere. I think the company that wins transactions, the fastest, the most seamless, the most reliable energy transactions will sort of win the energy game, right? And so we believe Exponent has a right to win there through the technology that we've built. But of course, a lot needs to be done from a business point of view, from an operations point of view, from where we are standing today. But I think we do all of that right. We hope to be the largest energy company for India.
That is so cool. How would the grid handle so many chargers? And you said we're going to have 40,000 chargers. Do you think the KEB or someone else can handle it? Is there capacity constraints there at the grid level?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look at 1980s Bangalore, I know we're both from Bangalore, and 2020 Bangalore, I think you would see the same uptake as pretty much every house has gone much higher on appliance use, utilization, etc. Right? So we've had a wave of spike, and the grid has kept up, has evolved. It's not perfect, but it's constantly kept up. And I think with the next wave of electrification, you will see energy utilization being let go in a whole bunch of places, which I think will also be captured by EV. And of course, you'll have further capacity being augmented there at a very rapid rate, right? So if you look at this, we look at this as energy generation, distribution, the transaction layer, and the application layer. So we sort of split all four, and all four need to be solved independently. We are in the last two, but we see a lot of work being done in 1 and 2, which is generation and distribution. And so as we go 10 years from now, we think a lot of industries will get decentralized with respect to their energy requirements. So we think a lot of that load will come back to the grid. It makes economic sense now if you're running, say, a 10,000 or 20,000 square foot sort of factory. It makes economic sense now to invest in solar, to invest in your localized storage. So which means the industrial need for energy will sort of come down. If you look at the last 5 to 6 years, India has significantly invested in renewables, and so if you look at the throughput through renewables has gone up significantly. And we look at Bangalore, for example, more than 50% of energy comes through renewables already, right? A lot of it is hydro, a lot of it is hydro, right? So I think this answer is not, it's not a one-line answer to this. I think it's multiple stakeholders coming together, but I'm fairly an optimist. So if you look at the last 40 years, we've always solved problems. I think the next 40 years we'll continue solving problems.
Well, you're an entrepreneur. You have to be optimist.
Yeah.
That's very good. So if Arun wasn't building Exponent, what would Arun be doing? Because it's a form of a question where I'm trying to understand, are there other problems that are very, very large venture scale problems that maybe our audience could get inspired from you?
Well, I still think I'll be building something. I love design, I love hardware, I love products. I think there are a lot of problems on the vehicle side that have just not been solved yet. I think we look at a vehicle that was designed in the 1980s and a vehicle that's designed today, they look fundamentally the same. Sure, we've gone electric, but beyond that, they look and feel the same. So I think we've sort of saturated in what a vehicle could look like and feel like. If you look at mobile phones, white goods, for example, we've had an exponential leap in what they look like, what they feel like. I think the vehicle industry hasn't gone through that sort of shift up. We still have a 2-ton machine carrying maybe 200 kg worth of people, right? That equation sounds wrong. I think something needs to change there. For example, eVTOL is a place that's rethinking mobility, rethinking material utilization. We haven't had that sort of radical rethinking of what a vehicle can look like and feel like. So I think that would be something that I would be quite interested in.
Very, very cool. So maybe we can just switch gears a little bit onto the deep tech side.
Sure.
And on the ecosystem side. You're a deep tech company, hardware company. People get scared of hearing those two words, especially in the investor community.
Yeah.
So how would other entrepreneurs be thinking about building deep tech companies? Because it is something that you've done successfully so far, and I'm sure you have many other challenges and opportunities in the future. So what would be your message for them raising money, especially in situations like this?
Yeah, I think just maybe a tactical point of view here is, I think a lot of companies building deep tech products or technologies get a little too obsessed by the technology itself. And as someone who's an engineer who loves technology, I mean, I think the technology is always the answer to something larger. And I think the focus, someone in the company needs to be focusing on the problem, the customer, the business, the revenue. And I think because at the end of the day, that's what matters. If you're building a business, then and you want to raise investor capital, then it's got to be a business, right? Else go raise grants, right? So I think that focus has to be very, very clear, that there has to be a consumer-centric narrative around the technology. The technology has to be relatable, and I think storytelling is even more important when you're building a deep tech company. I think that's something. When we started this journey, I wasn't very good at explaining or selling what we were building. I was still a product person. So I think it's been a sort of 3-year journey for me to learn a lot and get better every day on storytelling, because at the end of the day, investors are investing in the business, in you, and also a future vision of what this company is. I think most investors don't really care about the tech, and I think that's okay, right? Because that's what they're trusting you as a team to figure out, right? So I think that balance is great, and I think a lot of companies get annoyed that investors don't care about the tech. I think that's okay. I think that balance is important. I think they should be more focused on the business. I think you should be focused on translating what this technology could mean for them, for a larger vision in 10 years from now. And I think that storytelling could be a very powerful skill there.
If you would do this again, what would you change?
At Exponent?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, in hindsight, everything, a lot of obvious things, right? But I think that's just the advantage of hindsight.
Maybe top two things. Pick a couple that you thought was really valuable. You should have done first.
I think like a whole bunch of things on. I think speed is the most important thing, right? So for us, I think we've been fairly quick. In 3 years, we've sort of got into the market. But I think in hindsight, could we have done things a little faster? Could we have skipped a few steps? I think. But I think a lot of the things are not obvious. So it's also a question of actually doing it. So we have this philosophy of break, believe, build, which is you got to constantly iterate at a rapid pace. So if I look at the last 3 years, maybe we've had a few quarters where we haven't iterated as quickly. So maybe go back and sort of rethink if we can further get more accurate. I think we spent the first 1 year trying to launch this technology in a category that wasn't ready, right? So maybe that was something that we could have changed.
Which was that?
We actually wanted to launch this in trucks.
I see.
Right? On paper, it makes a lot more sense. But the ecosystem wasn't ready. There weren't that many people building trucks. In fact, there were 0 people building trucks. So at some point of time, after we spent like 8-9 months, the technology was fundamentally the same, but we at some point of time had to repivot and choose 3-wheelers as a launch product. Because there were vehicle manufacturers, there were customers, so the ecosystem was ready to accept the technology. So I think that was probably the first 6 months of error that we did, where we said, this technology is perfect for trucks, we should just chase the technology for trucks. I think that was, I guess, a learning for us. That also, if you're not an OEM yourself, and you're an enabler in the industry, you've got to be very cognizant to where the ecosystem is and how ready they are. As an enabler, you can't push the ecosystem ahead of its time. You can take an existing ecosystem and make it better, but you can't create a new ecosystem, right? So I think that was a big learning for us.
What would you tell some of the skeptics who say Exponent should be an OEM business? What would you say to them?
I think from a DNA perspective, we understand what it is to build an OEM, and we love to build an OEM at some point of time. But I don't think that's needed for our technology to win and scale. In fact, I think it should not. We shouldn't be an OEM for a bunch of reasons. This is like saying, hey, Intel should also build laptops. They're two very different businesses, right? Like an OEM business is about, a lot of it is about buying technology, integration, distribution, financing, with very different DNA from what we do. What we do in our energy business, at least in EV energy business, is there's a lot of complex tech, very different DNA. There's a technology plus network aspect to it, which is there's an operational aspect to our business, which is every day on the ground our chargers have to work, right? And there's a huge user experience aspect to it, which is twice a day our customers come charge with us. The DNA needed to build these 3 layers is very different from what is needed to build an OEM. An OEM, for example, would be built for manufacturing scale, for integration, for distribution. For example, a lot of OEMs would sell through dealers, right? Imagine you have to meet your OEM twice a day or thrice a day. Like, you would probably have a very bad experience doing that. But what we are very good at is managing these 3 things, right? Like I said, it's very different from what OEMs do. And they're both important, and they're both equally important. It's just that they're very different organizations, different DNA, different cultures, and they both need to work together. And I think if you're not able to find the right partners, then maybe it's a failure of BD activities. So becoming an OEM, if Exponent ever does that, I think that would just be a failure in our ability to get stakeholders to believe in us.
Very cool. You talked about something very interesting about payments. Do you believe in the future there'll not just be payments from the person who's taking and charging it versus the person giving energy back to the grid? Is that a vision that you would...
You mean like vehicle to grid?
Yeah.
Like for us, I think from an Indian point of view, we don't really look at vehicle to grid, and this is, and again, going back to the US scenario where a lot of vehicles are parked stationary and connected to the grid for extended periods of time, so you can then use the battery bank as a buffer. In India, you have very little time where the vehicle is connected to the grid. In fact, that's the problem we're trying to focus. We want to randomize mobility where the vehicle needs to, for the least amount of time, be connected to the grid and then move on. right? And you, like you said, maybe from 15 minutes to 5 minutes. So fundamentally, we think that energy would be one way. We think energy, the problem of energy here is how do you take it from the grid and send it to the vehicle ASAP, and not the other way around. So I think, and this is probably a nuance of maybe last mile mobility for India. Yeah.
Last question. If there's one thing that would lead Exponent to a parade, or one thing that will lead Exponent to a funeral, what would that be?
Oh, I think both cases will be us, the team, and how we execute. Strong believer in execution. I think execution is everything. I think everything we spoke about, technology, ideas, vision, I think is all that is great, but I think execution is everything, and I think it's just how we execute. And this is a ecosystem problem. We are building a flywheel, so which means in every city, more vehicles, more users, more charging stations, more OEMs. So when flywheels work, they work really, really well. But when flywheels don't work, they also don't work really, really well. So I think we're very cognizant about that flywheel and how it's spinning and how quickly it's spinning in the positive direction. So.
Well, Arun, it was wonderful having you. Thank you on our behalf from TDK Ventures for entertaining this, and very good luck for you and Exponent.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Fantastic doing this.